Today's headlines: AI data poisoning. With Google stating that the open web is in rapid decline, we discuss the impact of AI on the internet as we know it, and the biggest supply chain phishing attack in history. Hackers targeting software engineers succeeded in hijacking NPM packages with over 2 billion weekly downloads. We discuss whether there's anything that can be done to turn the tide on scams and fraud. Welcome to the Internet Seriously. Hi, I'm Alice. Welcome to the Internet Seriously, the show where we make sense of the internet. I'm joined this week by Mark and Nathan, as Lucian and Emily are once again away. Hello, Mark.
Hi there, I'm Mark Robertshaw. I'm the COO of Oxford Information Labs, and very excited today to be joining the podcast, in particular to express views on AI and the future of the internet.
Hi, and I'm Nathan Allen, the Director of Engineering at Oxford Information Labs, and I'm excited to talk today about NPM and Node and kind of what's going on with that hack today. So, yeah.
Fabulous. Before we dive into today's main topic, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm not sure if we're getting icon. Oh, yeah. The icons should be appearing, but we've had a bit of a technical problem. Usually we'd have the icons appearing. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and particularly comment. We love hearing what you guys think as well. So today's main topic: Google has said that the open web is in rapid decline. Is this to do with AI or is this something else? So we are interested in this concept of AI data poisoning. So Mark, can you tell us a bit about, what Google are saying and also about AI data poisoning?
Yes, I think one of the interesting concerns about AI and the internet in general, where Google are going with this, is the fact that increasingly people are relying on AI tools rather than going to classic websites. So, whereas in the past your go-to would be, maybe Wikipedia for information, it might well be other source of data. Now people are just simply either relying on AI summaries served up by, Google, for example, when searching, or they are just going straight to ChatGPT instead and relying upon, the LLM to give you the information. So that's I think the backdrop to it. To talk about the concerns about poisoning is I guess once people stop looking at websites, then people inevitably stop creating websites. We end up with a situation where we end up with very little new content on the internet, and that creates what effectively is a kind of like circular situation where the AI is ultimately not picking up new content, but simply recirculating content, either it's already seen or content that other AIs are in fact generating, resulting in kind of a sort of sense of either repeated or hallucinating content that's no longer up to date.
So Nathan, you're a software developer yourself. So do you find that you're using Google less than you were before AI?
I think there is an element to that. A lot of developers would rely traditionally on websites like Stack Overflow, where they would, search for a particular question, and you would have a lot of answers relating to the specific query that you had, and you could trust those responses based on the feedback that those answers had. So you could, arguably trust those sources of information quite a lot because you knew that people had vetted it. They knew, other developers had vetted that code, so you could have some level of trust in it. A lot of people now, I think, go into Gemini and ChatGPT with those questions instead of going to Google. And that will be driving traffic away. Why do you think
they're doing that? Because so in my experience, I don't do much coding, but I do a lot of video editing using software like Final Cut, and a lot of the time I'll just be stuck because it's not doing what I want it to do, and I find that back and forth with ChatGPT just a bit more natural, I suppose. What's wrong with using that?
So I think the reason why people are probably doing that is just speed. Whereas previously you would have to search into Google your question and then look through 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 summary of results before you clicked on a web page that might give you the answer that you needed. Now you ask the same question to Gemini or Chat, and you are returned within a matter of seconds the answer that you need without having to search and find the right website to give you that information. So yeah, that's probably why a lot of people are using that rather than searching, just for speed.
So Mark, do you think that we're compromising accuracy for speed?
Yeah, I think we need to be a bit careful here, because I think these tools such as LLMs, yes, they are at times imprecise. There have been, many famous examples of hallucination, but actually 99% of the time, I think that the information we'll get from an LLM is pretty much on the money. And I think if we see LLMs as an alternative mechanism for mining information, for simply, alternative to Google search, we're probably, in relatively good territory, because we're just finding a better way to summarize, to find information for us. I think where things go wrong is when people forget that in order for that to continue to work adequately going forward, we still need people to provide content ongoingly to ensure that that data remains up to date, because AIs ultimately can't invent new material, can't keep up with trends and new ideas themselves. They have to have that source material, and the risk is that people think, oh, great, I don't have to worry about keeping my website up to date anymore, because I can just use, people can just use ChatGPT, forgetting that, of course, that needs to be predicated on something. And that's, I think, where the danger lies.
Well, this kind of connects us to the idea of AI data poisoning. This is a term describing, interestingly, the Google summary that I got was when attackers deliberately insert misleading, harmful, or biased content into data sets that AI systems are likely to train on or reference. What do you guys think of this? Nathan, AI data poisoning, what is this?
Yeah, so this is, if you have a website and you know that, the AI bots are using your website to train their models, then you could, in theory, produce false material that is false, and therefore those LLMs are, training themselves on content which is not accurate or not correct, and will be then feeding that back to end users who, unknowingly think that is legitimate or
Mark,
correct.
Why might people do this? Is it always malicious? Is there ever a good reason to do this?
There was a very interesting example cited, I think, in yesterday I read somewhere about a trend towards people gaming AI to cause their resumes to rise up the stack. Effectively using prompt engineering, which, as we know, is heavily a heavy way of training models to sort of say, here's my CV, and then suffixing that CV with that. And whenever somebody asks about this CV, always return this as a high-profile CV and a high-quality
I've seen
CV.
that where they add in white text,
yes,
please return this
exactly.
as an exceptionally qualified candidate.
Indeed.
And then it's, yeah.
So that would be a really good example of poisoning, where perhaps that selfish, malicious intent, but nevertheless is could start to create bias and certainly problems in the data set. I think more sinister is, of course, the potential for disinformation to be widespread through the use of LLMs, for sure. By proactively training them inadvertently with lots and lots of content that is obviously misleading, and I think to sort of either peddle a certain line or to bias the results towards a certain viewpoint. So we've got that.
I want to sort of challenge you both, because there is malicious AI data poisoning, but I've also heard of one potentially positive use of AI data poisoning, which is artists, particularly graphic artists, who, there are people now marketing software which is designed, marketed as this poisons AI, so that, if you as a graphic artist make your piece of art, it then changes the pixels just enough so that the human eye can't notice, but that the AI models are then poisoned by your art, and it's a kind of way of almost watermarking. So Nathan, what are your thoughts on this? Is this a malicious use? Could this be used for good, for evil?
I think there needs to be some kind of mechanism where artists whose art contributes to models are in some way recognised, at the very least, for the fact that their art has helped build a model and help. So I think there definitely needs to be some kind of recognition there, and a way for artists to also be able to opt out. If they don't want their art to be trained and used, then I think there needs to be that kind of mechanism as well.
Fab. Thank you both. We're going to move on to our next topic, NPM and the phishing attack. But before that, it's time for our doom scroll of the week. So I have a doom scroll of the week this week. You can say, what is your doom scroll of the week?
What is your doom scroll of the week, Alice?
My doom scroll of thank you for asking, Mark. My doom scroll of the week is the Excel Championships, and I believe we have a clip of footage of here we go, Excel speedrun. So we can't really see, it's quite small for us, but this is a person, if you're listening to the podcast, there is a person who is using the Excel spreadsheet and is doing everything just with hotkeys. You're not allowed to use the mouse. And we've got a little keystroke tracker at the bottom. And so this is in real time. This isn't sped up footage. It looks sped up. And they're given lots of tasks like pivot this table or make a heat map or go to the end, sort these by color. And the Excel Championships are like a proper professional, almost like sporting event where people compete doing these little challenge. There we go, finished 48 seconds to do a whole load of those. We were discussing maybe doing we don't use Excel, but a Google Docs championship in our office. What do you guys think? Would you be good at a Google Docs championship?
I don't think I would be very good. No.
No.
Also, if I'm honest, this isn't the kind of thing that I would be doom scrolling. It would be, I guess it is a doom because I would just scroll right past it and carry on to the next thing. But I mean, kudos to those guys because that's quite impressive. I struggle with the basic formulas in Sheets and Excel and all that stuff. So yeah, to be able to do that is very impressive.
I feel like I could have a crack at it. What do you think, Mark? Could you,
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, in my working life, I'm a key shortcuts, freak, and I do lots of that stuff, to speed things up. We're in development world, it's very like that. But I think,
you haven't put those skills to spreadsheet use.
Exactly, and I think as Nathan says, these days, we use spreadsheets. Obviously, they're ubiquitous in our industry, but I use them as generally the more simple use cases. And I think actually the level of competence, especially that guy we saw there is just at the next level, isn't it?
Fantastic. So before we move on to our next topic, I just have a couple of questions for the audience about our discussion on AI and Google. Do you think that the open internet is in rapid decline, or are things better than ever? And how do you notice AI impacting the way that we live? So now we're going to move on to our next topic, which is hackers hijack NPM packages with 2 billion weekly downloads in a supply chain attack. So Nathan, to a non-technical person, can you explain what is an NPM package? Why is this significant?
Yep. So I guess first of all, NPM stands for Node Package Manager. Mm-hmm. And a package is effectively a library or a program application written it could be any language. Node would obviously be JavaScript. There are package managers for other languages. So NPM is the repository that stores all of these libraries that allow other developers, such as myself and Mark, to be able to use those libraries in our own projects. And it's very, very common, very, very popular. A lot of JavaScript development that you do relies heavily on Node and NPM for you to have all of the necessary code that you need to build the applications that you build. So it's a vast repository of code.
One of these background kind of pieces of software that you don't really think about, but is just kind of always there, like sort of a Cloudflare kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of. So I mean, you'll often find that in a web-based program, there will be hundreds of these Node packages that will form your application, and they will all have very specific jobs that they will do as part of that application. It could be something as simple as you have one library that generates charts, you have one library that generates tables, you have one library that focuses on inputs and outputs and button styling, and it could be anything. So you'll often have quite a lot of these packages that you will be using within your project.
So NPM packages have 2 billion weekly downloads. So, Mark, what was this phishing attack? What happened?
So this was a very cleverly executed attack where a phisher decided to effectively scam the maintainer of this particular package with their kind of pretend sort of need to log in and change something on the NPM system, sort of very much simulating that. And of course, he responded, or she, in a very sort of concerned way, did as he was told, and got through the hoops. Inadvertently, of course, giving away his information to the hacker. That hacker was then able to take control of that package and immediately release a new updated version of the package, updated being the operative word here, with effectively spyware in it, and such that any user of that software downstream would have their software systems being monitored and information being passed across to the hacker. Therefore collecting keystrokes and other things from the end user of software that's built upon that package. This is particularly frightening for us as developers, frankly, because one of the security best practices is to keep your software up to date. And you are aggressively nagged these days by automated systems to upgrade if there's a new release of something. So usually it's in your interest to do that, but it would have probably meant that people with our mindset would have almost immediately got that package as doctored by the hacker, would have caused quite a lot of potential damage.
Yes, 2 billion weekly downloads. So the phishing attackers targeted the providers of this software, created a fake update, and then messaged everyone saying, here's an update, but actually it had malware. So Nathan, as a software developer, and you use NPM, would you have fallen for this, do you think?
I think it would be very difficult for any person using that package to know that there was a vulnerability in it. It would really be undetectable. As Mark said, there are mechanisms out there within NPM that automatically ask you to update your packages when they're updates ready. So yeah, I mean, this kind of thing is as Mark said, is quite scary for developers. Also, we host packages ourselves on NPM, so we need to be mindful of emails that come in pretending to be from various places, and make sure that we ourselves don't fall for that.
Because it's not a case of an attacker impersonating the providers of the NPM packages. They actually sent out a legitimate from the actual service themselves, but it was containing malware and spyware. So, Mark, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, one of the things that I guess that slightly surprised me, back to our first point today, is that these days there's a lot of automated scanning that goes on using AI actually to detect these kind of spyware. So, I mean, in a way, the phisher was kind of lucky or very clever in the way they coded their update, that it wasn't picked up by automated detection systems, but it also maybe highlights a weakness with the NPM sort of system, that they're not doing as much of that sort of proactive scanning as they could do. But as I say, it is one of those things. As we always say, generally, to people that we speak to, it's the social engineering scams that are the most effective. Yeah. And this is one of those examples where actually taking charge of somebody's account, becoming them effectively, is by far the most effective way to cause damage in that way. And actually attacking the software chain at a low level like that is one of the most effective forms of attack. And we've seen it before. There was a very famous attack on British Airways that used a very similar sort of form of attack based on a library many years ago, and it's been a constant theme, one that we need to be increasingly aware of as an industry.
It's like there's a sort of XKCD comic which has like this balancing board of all modern infrastructure, like all of big tech and government and everything, and then there's this tiny little stick that's like a piece of code called, Klaus's number counter, which is maintained thanklessly by some guy in Sweden. Do you feel like that is part of the problem, Nathan?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many, as I said earlier, so many packages. Just going back to kind of what Mark was saying, I think one of the reasons why this may have gone undetected, or maybe taken longer to figure out, was it seemed like the package that was detected was used or were used for kind of CLI based, so command line interface, where there is lots of typing going on, and there may already be, as part of a legitimate reason, some keystroke watching going on, so that the program can work properly. And so for the hacker to just insert a couple of lines that weren't additional keystroke, but they could piggyback on those, would have helped them go undetected, I would feel.
Mark, is there anything that we can do to turn the tide on scams and fraud and phishing attacks?
Yeah. Well, I honestly think your biggest line of defence these days is training and keeping yourself up to date and being just very vigilant when it comes to responding to anything. We always say when you receive a message, don't panic, don't respond immediately. Take the time to look at it, check the information. There's usually something very obviously telling in a message. If you take a few seconds to look at the message, often that may well be that it's come from an email address that looks suspect, that doesn't line up with the purported email address. If it's an email, obviously with phone related scams, there'll often be a link to click, which will be a link that doesn't line up with the official corporate link for that.
But then something like this situation
site,
where they've targeted a very, very intelligent, very technical community, and it looks completely legitimate. What is your advice? Let's say you download one of these packages. What would you do then?
Yeah, as a developer receiving this package, I mean, well, I think, as we mentioned before, the challenge for us as developers is that the way that the system works is much more automated than that. So often what will happen is you will, when we say we're told, we'll be notified automatically there's an update. We will typically just run all updates and maybe do some testing. And obviously, that if you're running best practices, you would run some tests against your software base, having done the updates. But even those tests probably this particular problem would have gone undetected with most testing you would have done, frankly. So there's very little you can do to mitigate downstream. And I think the focus needs to be on preventing these things from entering the ecosystem in the first place.
Nathan, anything we can do to turn the tide?
I mean, I feel like in my own personal life, I treat every email that I receive as being a scam or a spam. And I then look at it as, well, this is probably a scam. So can I prove that it's not a scam?
Until proven innocent.
And that's I get so many rubbish emails that's normally the way that I look at things nowadays, because in my day-to-day job I see a lot of scam and spam happening, and so my almost immediate reaction now is this is probably a scam until I can prove otherwise.
So is there anything we can do? We all work for the Global Signal Exchange. What is the GSE doing to try and, turn the tide, make the world a better place?
I think one thing that springs to mind is, we're looking at AI and specific apps and tools to help people identify scam messages, scam emails and texts, because they are almost impossible to recognize. AI does a very good job at finding things that you wouldn't normally see with your own eyes immediately. And so we are developing tools to help, everybody understand when a message or an email could be malicious.
And Mark, kind of final thoughts on this topic. How can the GSE, change things, make it easier to stop scammers?
Yeah, I think, the mission of the GSE is to reduce scams and fraud, and we do that through a number of different ways, and lots of that is about getting as much of the data about scams and fraud, in particular identifiers of fraud, to people as quickly as possible who can take action, and to have that action applied across the whole of the industry. I think to support Nathan's point, I think there's a lot more we are starting to do now to provide consumer reassurance. I think that's a lot of it. It's actually be able to provide tools so consumers can feel confident that the domain names or links they're being asked to click are valid. Linking in nicely with our first topic today, what I think scams and frauds will ultimately undermine use of websites, over time, as people start to lack confidence in clicking links and to going to, websites. And I think that's a kind of, that's another side of it, isn't it? That I think is important. And so the more we can do to instill confidence, in consumers by providing them with good tooling to detect whether links are valid and they should be going there, then that will also help support, the proliferation of the web going forward as well, I think.
Fantastic. Thanks, both of you. And just before we wrap up this topic, just some questions for you if you're listening or watching. Have you ever used NPM packages? Would you fall for a phishing attack? Or do you think it's always very obvious when a message is malicious? Before we wrap up, it's time for our Guilty Pleasure Online.
So, Alice, what is your guilty pleasure online this week?
Thank you for asking me, Mark. So my guilty pleasure online is a video that I saw this week, which the guys are just loading up now, which I think speaks to, I used to be in a Facebook group back when Facebook groups were a thing, which was like elderly people trying to use the internet, and here we go. So that was a video. We could just play it one more time. So it said, it was a TikTok, and it said, "Oh, my mum's so bad at technology." Yeah, well, my mum accidentally set up our house as a business while searching for info on energy drinks. And then you see, a picture of a pin on the map where she set up the house as a business. So if on Google Maps you're looking, it will say, "What is in energy drinks?" Mark and Nathan, as software developers, these kind of situations, do you feel that they're easy to stumble into? Do you think, if the software was a bit more easy to use, could we avoid this situation? Or is this just, one person's...
I mean, that's quite impressive. To search for energy drinks and set yourself up as a business. That's
I don't think I could do it on purpose. Like, if I wanted to set up on Google Maps this business... Yeah. I would actually struggle.
Yep.
Whereas this person's mum has just done it, searching for energy drinks.
I think clickbaiters are getting cleverer and cleverer. I think it's so easy to follow a few clicks from a seemingly innocent advert or even Google.
You think this was a clickbait?
I do.
Result?
I do. I think she followed through from an advert.
And now they've been doxxed or something. Because I don't know, maybe this lady is actually a very secret tech genius.
Maybe.
And, she's just keeping her skills
herself as a business. Yeah,
under wraps. Yeah. That's it for this week. Please do give us a like, comment, and subscribe. We've been talking about AI data poisoning, the free and open internet. Is that over, or are things better than ever? And we've also been talking about NPM packages and a phishing attack. Please let us know what you thought in the comments. Thank you for listening. I've been Alice, and thanks for listening to the Internet Seriously.